This is my true story. I worked my whole life so my son could live in comfort. I gave him food, shelter, and a future I never had. But one evening, while the dog ate beside me, he pushed a bowl onto the floor. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Eat there. That's all you deserve." My heart shattered, but I stayed silent. Because you won't believe what I did next. Before that, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And please subscribe so my story can reach more people. I was not a rich man when life began for me. I was a worker, plain and simple. My days were built on labor, my nights on exhaustion, and my only dream was to build something better for my son. My hands carried scars from fields, from machines, from endless hours of toil. Each scar was a story, a sacrifice, a silent gift for him. I rose before the sun and returned after it set. I bent my back so his could stand straight. I went without so he could have enough. Every coin I earned, every meal I skipped, every hour I sweated under roofs that were not mine, I did it all for him. When he was a boy, he never knew hunger because I filled his plate first, even when my own stomach growled. He never knew cold because I wrapped my coat around him while I shivered in the night. He never knew shame because I worked extra shifts to buy him school uniforms, books, shoes, and everything else that gave him dignity among his peers. I labored so he could walk into classrooms with his head high while I went home with mine bowed in fatigue. I wanted his world to be bigger than mine. I wanted him to have choices, freedom, comfort. And so I gave everything I had. Every payday I divided what little I had. Rent first, food second, and then everything else went to him. His schooling drained me, but I never hesitated. His debts became my debts, but I paid them. When he was old enough for a car, I signed the papers, paid the insurance, and filled the tank so he could move freely while I still walked. When he needed help starting his life, I opened my accounts, put his name beside mine, and told myself this was love, this was trust, this was what fathers do. The very house he lives in today, the same house where he humiliated me, was built on the strength of my body and the thin thread of my wages. I saved for years, putting away small amounts until they grew enough for a down payment. I built it brick by brick with my sacrifices. Every nail, every beam, every wall stands because I endured storms, because I skipped meals, because I gave pieces of myself to make it rise. And when the deed was written, it was my name at the top. My hand signed it. My money sealed it. My hope built it. I thought that when I grew old, when my body weakened, he would look at me with gratitude. I thought he would remember the nights I carried him on my shoulders when he was tired, the nights I stayed awake when he was sick, the nights I worked double so he could have more than enough. I believed that the sacrifices of a father would be repaid with the care of a son. That is what I held on to during every hard shift, every aching morning, every hour of loneliness. I believed love would come back. But I was wrong. My sacrifices became invisible. What I gave freely became his expectation. What cost me my strength, my health, my joy, became to him nothing more than normal life. He never asked where it came from. He never saw the price I paid. He grew, he lived, he consumed, but he never honored. My sacrifice was not his memory. My sacrifice became his entitlement. Still, I did not complain. Still, I told myself patience would teach him. Still, I hoped that one day he would look at me and see the truth, that everything he stood on was built by me. I thought maybe, when he saw my hands shaking from age, he would remember those same hands carried him through storms. I thought maybe, when he saw my legs weak, he would remember those same legs walked miles so he could ride in comfort. I thought maybe, when he saw my silence, he would know it was not weakness, but love. But he never remembered. He only demanded more. He only grew colder. And the house I built, the accounts I opened, the sacrifices I made, they became weapons in his hands. Weapons he would one day turn against me. I believed in the return of love. Instead, I was repaid with cruelty. It did not happen all at once. Cruelty is a slow fire. It begins as sparks, small enough to ignore, easy enough to excuse. The first signs came in whispers, in tones, in glances that cut sharper than knives. At first he called me forgetful when I misplaced small things. "Old man," he would mutter, shaking his head, as if my years of age were a weakness and not a crown. He laughed when my hands trembled while pouring tea. He mocked the way I walked slowly to the table, as though I was a burden to his time. I told myself it was just frustration, that young men sometimes lose patience. But deep inside, I felt the sting. Respect was slipping away, and I could feel it. Then came the words, colder than winter air. He began calling me pathetic when I ate slowly. He said I chewed like a dog. I looked down at my plate, pretending I had not heard, but the words stayed. He rolled his eyes when I asked him simple questions. When I needed help lifting something, he sighed, as if my weakness was an insult to him. His voice, once soft when he was a child, now struck me like a whip. I remembered when he held my hand tightly as a boy, afraid to cross the road. Now he recoiled when my hands reached for the table. The bond we once had was rotting, replaced by disdain. I still gave him excuses. I told myself he was stressed, that life was heavy on his shoulders. I told myself he would remember one day who I was, what I had done. I told myself love was stronger than arrogance, but each day the signs grew louder. He stopped saying thank you. He stopped asking how I felt. He began to speak to me as if I was an obstacle, not a father. My presence in the home I built became an irritation to him. Then came the moments when his cruelty no longer hid behind words, but showed itself in his eyes. He looked at me, not as a man, not as the father who built his world, but as something lower. A shadow, a weight, a mouth that ate food he believed was his. He began to remind me that it was his house now, though the papers still carried my name. He began to speak of me as if I were living on his charity. And I would sit silently, remembering the nights I skipped food so he could eat, remembering the debts I cleared for him, remembering the roof I built over his head. Yet in his eyes, all that was gone. One evening, when I asked him to sit with me for dinner, he said he was too busy, but I heard him laughing with his friends in the other room. When I asked him to visit the bank with me, he said he had better things to do. When I asked him to help me fix a chair, he told me to throw it away. Each rejection was a reminder. Each refusal was a nail in the coffin of the bond between us. I began to notice how he treated others differently. To neighbors, he smiled. To strangers, he spoke politely. To his friends, he was generous. But to me, his father, he gave only sharp words and heavy sighs. The respect he showed the world was stolen from me. I was not father in his eyes anymore. I was furniture. I was weight. I was noise in his ears. I swallowed the insults, telling myself silence was better than conflict. I told myself he would grow out of it. I told myself time would heal. I waited for kindness to return like spring after winter. But the seasons never changed. The cruelty only grew. It started small, but soon it would become unbearable. Soon it would no longer be words. It would be acts. Acts that would scar my soul deeper than labor ever scarred my hands. The night it happened is carved in my memory like a scar that will never fade. The room was quiet, the smell of dinner still in the air, and the dog sat wagging its tail by the corner. I thought it would be a normal evening, nothing more than silence and food. But my son had other plans. He looked at me with eyes that held no warmth, no respect, no memory of who I was. He walked into the kitchen, grabbed a dog's bowl from the floor, and placed it in front of me. For a moment I thought he was joking, that this was some cruel attempt at humor. But then I saw his face, cold, hard, unflinching. He filled that bowl with scraps, bits of leftovers not good enough even for a plate. He pushed it toward me with his foot and said the words that froze my soul. "Eat there. That's all you deserve." The silence that followed was heavier than any noise. My ears rang, not from sound, but from the weight of humiliation. I looked at the bowl, then at him, and my heart cracked open. This was my son, the boy I once carried on my shoulders, the child I once fed with my own hands. And now he commanded me to eat like an animal. My lips trembled, my hands shook, my body froze. The dog, confused, looked at me with kinder eyes than my own flesh and blood. That animal, who depended on scraps and kindness, still saw me as human. But my son did not. I bent down, not out of obedience, but out of shock. My knees touched the ground that I once swept clean for him. My face lowered to the level of the dog that once guarded our door. My mouth touched humiliation that burned worse than hunger. I tasted betrayal more bitter than any food could be. Every chew was not of food, but of pain. My son stood above me, watching, smirking, enjoying the power he thought he held. He reduced me, the father who built his world, to nothing more than a creature in his home. Tears slid down my cheeks, not because of the scraps I chewed, but because of the memory of who I once was. I remembered when I fed him from my plate, making sure he never went hungry. I remembered when I worked double shifts so his birthday cakes would be big, so his holidays would be bright, so his life would be full. I remembered when he cried as a child, and I knelt to wipe his tears. And now, years later, I knelt again. Not to comfort him, but to bear his cruelty. He laughed. That laugh was sharper than knives, colder than winter storms. He said I should be grateful, that at least I still had food. His words cut me deeper than any blade could. Gratitude? For scraps in a dog's bowl? For the mockery of my dignity? For the betrayal of my blood? Number. This was not gratitude. This was war. That night, something inside me died. But something else was born. My silence became fire. My humiliation became fuel. The man he thought he broke was not broken. The man he thought he reduced to an animal was still the same man who built the walls around him, who paid for the food he mocked me with, who gave him the life he now used to humiliate me. He forgot one truth: cruelty blinds the arrogant. And while he thought he was master, I knew I still held the real power. I sat there long after he left the room, the dog's bowl still on the floor, the scraps cold and untouched around the edges. My knees ached from the hard floor, but the ache inside me was heavier than any bone pain. I wiped my mouth with the back of my trembling hand, but I could not wipe away the shame. It clung to me like dirt, thick and unshakable. My chest tightened as if my heart itself wanted to burst out and flee from the humiliation. The silence in that room was unbearable. It screamed louder than any insult, louder than any strike. My son's laughter still echoed in my ears, even though he had gone to his room, leaving me crouched like an animal in the house I built. I remembered the storms when he was small, when thunder shook the walls and lightning lit the sky. He would run into my arms, terrified, and I would hold him until he slept. I never let him feel fear, never let him feel hunger, never let him feel shame. I stood like a shield, taking every blow that life gave so he could stand untouched. And yet here I was, brought lower than a shield, lower than a father, lower than a man. He had dragged me into a pit of shame that even strangers on the street would not dare to throw me in. My own blood. My son. The dog sat near me, its eyes watching, its head tilted, confused. Even that creature seemed to understand that something was wrong. The dog did not mock me. The dog did not command me. The dog simply watched in silence, its loyalty unbroken. I thought to myself how cruel life is when a beast shows me more respect than my own flesh and blood. And in that moment, tears filled my eyes and dropped silently to the floor. They were not tears of weakness anymore. They were tears of clarity. My silence was no longer submission. My silence was transformation. As I sat, I realized what he did not. He thought spit, kicks, and orders could erase my worth. He thought humiliation could strip me of everything. But he forgot the truth of power. He forgot who signed the papers, who saved the money, who built the home, who held the keys, who owned the accounts. He forgot that the man he mocked still held the ground under his feet. His cruelty blinded him. His arrogance made him careless. And his mockery turned into the very knife that would cut his future apart. But in that moment, I did not move. I did not argue. I did not shout. I sat in silence, holding the fire inside me. My silence was not weakness anymore. It was a storm gathering, a tide rising, a hammer waiting to fall. I let him laugh. I let him believe he had won. I let him think he had turned me into nothing. Because when the silence breaks, it breaks louder than thunder. And he would soon learn that the man he forced to eat from the dog's bowl was still the man who controlled his world. He thought humiliation was power. He thought pushing a bowl in front of me made him master and me servant. He thought cruelty was strength. But what he never understood was that power does not live in kicks, in spit, or in laughter. Power lives in silence, in signatures, in names on paper, in numbers written in accounts, in deeds locked away in drawers. While he mocked me, while he raised his voice above mine, while he reduced me to nothing, he forgot the truth that lay beneath it all. He forgot that the house he lived in carried my name. He forgot that the car he drove each day was bought with my money. He forgot that every account he depended on had my signature tied to it. He forgot that the man he treated as an animal was still the man who built his entire life. He looked at me and saw weakness. He saw old age. He saw trembling hands, tired eyes, slow steps. He thought these things meant I was finished. He thought my years of sacrifice had ended in nothing. But what he did not see was the power hidden in plain sight. I still owned everything. My silence was not the silence of defeat. My silence was the silence of control. I watched him boast, laugh, and command. But deep inside I knew one truth. I held the future, not him. Every dollar in the bank that he counted as his own, I could move with a single signature. Every property paper he claimed, I could sign away without asking. Every resource he relied on, the house, the car, the accounts, all of it was built by me, owned by me, controlled by me. He thought he had stripped me of dignity, but he had only revealed his own blindness. He mistook arrogance for power. He mistook age for weakness. He mistook cruelty for strength. And in doing so, he gave me the weapon I needed. As I sat in silence, I remembered each sacrifice that built his comfort. I remembered the debts I paid, the bills I cleared, the accounts I opened in trust. He thought his life was his own, but it was not. It was borrowed from me. And now he would pay the price for forgetting that truth. My humiliation that night did not end me. It awakened me. It showed me the sharpest edge of his arrogance, and it reminded me of the keys still in my hand. Yes, he locked doors against me, but he forgot I held the master key. Yes, he pushed a dog's bowl toward me, but he forgot I controlled the table he ate from. Yes, he mocked me as powerless, but he forgot that true power is quiet, invisible, and final. He forgot that while he laughed, I still had the last move. And as I sat there, wiping my tears, tasting betrayal on my lips, I whispered to myself, he will learn. He will learn that cruelty has a cost. He will learn that power built on disrespect collapses. He will learn that the man he forced to the floor was still the man who could bring him down without lifting a hand. He thought the dog's bowl was my end, but in truth, it was his. That night, when the house fell quiet and only the hum of the refrigerator filled the air, I sat in my chair and thought of everything. The taste of humiliation was still in my mouth, sharper than the scraps he had thrown at me. My ribs ached not from any blow, but from the weight of sorrow pressing down on me. My heart was heavy, but my mind was clear. I realized then that love was gone. Respect was gone. Gratitude was gone. All that remained between me and my son was cruelty, mockery, and arrogance. And as I sat there, I made a choice. I decided I would not wait for him to change. I decided I would not beg for kindness that would never return. I decided I would not lower myself again, not for him, not for anyone. That night, silence became my weapon. My revenge would not be in shouts, not in fights, not in broken words. My revenge would be in action, in cold steps, in choices that needed no explanation. He had dragged me down to the floor, but I would rise higher than ever. And when I rose, he would fall into the pit he dug for me. I thought of the accounts, of the numbers stored away in the bank, numbers he believed belonged to him. I thought of the house, the car, the documents locked in my drawer, all tied to my name. I thought of the trust I had placed in him, the gifts I had given freely, the doors I had left open for him. I thought of how he had taken it all for granted, using it not to honor me, but to humiliate me. and I told myself, enough. This ends now. The decision was not born of anger alone. It was born of dignity. He believed he had stripped me of it, but dignity is not something you can steal. It is something you either protect or lose. That night, I chose to protect mine. I would not eat from the floor again. I would not bow again. I would not let him laugh while I suffered. If he saw me as nothing, then I would leave him with nothing. I sat with the thought, letting it settle into my bones. The more I thought of it, the stronger it became. He thought cruelty was his weapon, but my silence would be sharper. He thought locking doors was strength, but I would close the doors he never saw. He thought the dog's bowl was the end of me, but it would be the beginning of his downfall. I looked around the house one last time. The pictures on the walls, the furniture, the walls themselves, all reminders of what I had built. He thought it was his, but it was not. It was mine. And soon, he would know it. Soon he would understand that the man he mocked still held everything. Soon he would feel the cold bite of abandonment, not from love, but from money, from security, from survival. That night, I whispered to myself, tomorrow, I act. Tomorrow, I take back everything. Tomorrow, I leave him as he left me, empty, cold, and outside the doors of his own life. My decision was final. My resolve was unbreakable. My revenge had begun. The morning came cold and quiet, but inside me burned a fire that had not existed the night before. I woke before the sun, washed my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time in many years, I did not see weakness. I did not see trembling hands or tired eyes. I saw a man with purpose, a man who had been broken down, but who still held the final card. My son was still asleep, careless, dreaming on the bed I paid for, under the roof I built, unaware that his life was about to change forever. I did not leave him a note. I did not wake him. I wanted him to discover his downfall in silence, the same silence he forced upon me when he shoved a dog's bowl at my feet. I took the folder from my drawer, deeds, documents, bank books, all signed with my name. The weight of that folder was the weight of his future, and it was still in my hands. I slipped it under my arm and walked out the door. My footsteps were steady. Each step echoed with years of sacrifice, each step a reminder of why I was doing this. I was not walking away in weakness. I was walking toward justice. When I reached the bank, I felt no fear. I walked to the counter, placed my ID on the glass, and said the words that sealed my revenge. Close the joint accounts. Transfer everything to me. The clerk looked at the papers, at my signature, at the authority that still rested with me. She nodded. The process began. I watched the numbers move, account after account, balance after balance. Savings, checking, investments, every dollar drained. Years of my labor that he claimed as his own flowed back to me in a single moment. The sound of the clerk's keyboard was music to me. Each keystroke was a nail in the coffin of his arrogance. Each confirmation stamp was a blow against his cruelty. By the time the process ended, the accounts he thought were his lifeline stood empty. The balances showed zeros where once they showed millions. The future he had mocked me with was erased by the man he humiliated. I felt no guilt. I felt no hesitation. This was not theft. This was justice. I carried the receipts in my pocket, folded tight, as if they were proof of my rebirth. I stepped out of the bank into the morning sun. The air felt different. Lighter. For the first time in years, I breathed freely. I had taken back what was mine. I had stripped him not with fists, not with words, but with the cold power of silence and signatures. He thought he left me with nothing. Now he was the one left with nothing. I walked past people on the street, none of them knowing the storm that had just shifted. None of them knowing that a father had just undone the cruelty of his own son. None of them knowing that behind my calm face was the satisfaction of justice. I thought of him, still asleep, still arrogant, still believing he had power. Soon he would wake. Soon he would reach for what he thought was his. Soon, he would discover the truth. And when he did, he would taste the same humiliation he forced upon me. That morning, I did not return home. I had no need to. My silence was my farewell. My absence was my answer. I left him the same way he left me, abandoned, stripped, forgotten. He pushed me to the dog's bowl. I pushed him into emptiness. The news reached him faster than I expected. I was not there to see his face when he first logged into the account, but I can imagine it clearly. His arrogance must have cracked in a single moment. 1 second he thought he was rich, powerful, untouchable. The next second, the screen showed nothing but zeros. No savings, no checking, no security, just emptiness staring back at him. The silence of an empty account is louder than any argument. It shouts, it mocks, it cuts deeper than words, and I know it cut him in ways he never thought possible. Later, I heard from neighbors. They said he stormed out of the house that morning, shouting into his phone, demanding answers. He rushed to the bank, face twisted with rage, papers clutched in his hands. He pounded on the counter, asking where his money had gone, yelling at clerks who only shook their heads and showed him the truth. It was never his. It was mine. My signature had moved it. My authority had erased his comfort. He screamed, but the world did not bend to him. He was no longer the master in the house, no longer the arrogant son with a fortune at his feet. He was just another man with empty pockets. Relatives called me. Some whispered, some shouted, asking if it was true. Had I really emptied the accounts? Had I really left him with nothing? Their voices carried shock, but not all carried anger. Many of them had seen his cruelty. They had seen the way he treated me at gatherings, the way he mocked me behind my back, the way he flaunted wealth that was never truly his. Some of them told me quietly that he deserved it. Some said it was justice long overdue. Some even said they respected me for finally standing up. The whispers spread, and with them, his reputation crumbled. For years, he had walked proudly, boasting of money, showing off cars, speaking down to those he thought beneath him. Now, those same people saw the truth. He had been fed by my hands, carried by my sacrifices, lifted by my labor. And without me, he was nothing. His pride collapsed in front of them all. His arrogance turned into shame. His cruelty turned into desperation. He called me again and again, but I never answered. His voice, once filled with commands, now broke with begging. Each missed call was a reminder that the power had shifted. He had laughed while I ate from the floor. Now he would starve in silence. I imagined him pacing the house, searching for answers, looking at the walls, the furniture, the life I had built, realizing they meant nothing without the accounts to support them. His friends would leave him. His neighbors would whisper. His relatives would shake their heads. Respect is fragile, and he had shattered his own. The man who forced his father to eat from a dog's bowl was now left with nothing but his cruelty echoing back at him. That was the fallout. Not just money lost, but reputation, pride, and power gone. I did not need to see it with my eyes. I could feel it in the silence of my phone, in the whispers carried back to me, in the absence of his confidence. He thought I was powerless. He thought I was broken. But now he knew the truth. The man he humiliated still held the final word. After the accounts were emptied and the whispers spread, life shifted in ways my son never imagined. The house that once felt like a fortress to him turned into a prison of shame. He could no longer boast to friends about money, because he had none. He could no longer throw his weight around, because the weight was gone. People stopped answering his calls. Friends who came for drinks stopped coming. Relatives who used to tolerate his arrogance now looked at him with disgust. The man who thought he was feared became the man everyone pitied, and pity is worse than fear. I heard from neighbors that he would sit on the porch late at night, staring into the dark, his phone glowing in his hand as he called me again and again. Each time I ignored it. Each time I let the silence answer for me. My silence was his teacher now. He had mocked me when I was silent before, but now he knew the power of it. Silence starves the soul when you are desperate for a reply. And I gave him none. His life unraveled quickly. Bills piled up. Without the accounts, he could not keep up with payments. The car that once carried him with pride was taken by the bank. The luxuries he flaunted were repossessed one by one. His arrogance had no foundation anymore, and the world saw through him. The same neighbors he once looked down on now shook their heads and whispered of his downfall. He forced his own father to eat from the dog's bowl, they said. And look where it got him. His name was no longer tied to pride, it was tied to shame. And me? I lived free. I rented a small place in peace, with my money secured, my dignity intact. I sat at my own table, eating food from my own plate, no laughter mocking me, no cruelty pressing me down. I breathed air that was mine, not borrowed. For the first time in many years, I slept without heaviness on my chest. The scars of humiliation were still there, but they had hardened into strength. I no longer saw myself as weak. I no longer felt like a burden. I was a man again, a father who had taken back his power. The aftermath was simple. He had nothing. I had peace. He had shame. I had dignity. He had hunger. I had freedom. The world now saw him for what he was, and they saw me for what I had always been. The man who built everything and then took it back when cruelty crossed the line. Justice does not always come in courts or with loud punishments. Sometimes justice is quiet. Sometimes justice is a father walking away with the dignity his son thought was gone. Sometimes justice is not giving one more word, not one more coin, not one more ounce of love to the one who betrayed it. That was my justice. He thought forcing me to eat from a dog's bowl made him strong. He thought locking doors, raising his voice, and spitting cruelty would bury me. But I proved him wrong. The man he mocked, the man he lowered, the man he tried to break was still the one who held the true power. I did not strike him. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply took back what was mine and left him with the emptiness he deserved. In the end, he was the one who starved, not just from food, but from pride, from money, from respect. The accounts were empty, the house turned cold, the car gone, the reputation shattered. He was left with nothing but his cruelty echoing back at him. That is what arrogance buys. That is what mockery earns. He believed he could strip me of dignity, but all he did was strip himself of everything. And me? I found peace. I ate from my own plate in silence, with no one laughing over me. I walked in freedom, with money secured and respect restored. I no longer bowed my head in shame. I no longer trembled at his words. My silence became my shield. My revenge became my freedom. And every morning when I wake, I remind myself that sometimes walking away is the sharpest blade. I never looked back. He may call, he may beg, he may cry, but I will never answer. My justice is complete. My story is finished. And my final thought is simple. He forced me to eat from a dog's bowl. I emptied his bank account and left him to starve.